She cuts through the fluff, the fads, the fear mongering, and she brings us back to what's real, what's rooted in science, and what actually helps.
I think at the end of the day, health is about individual choices. Wellness and health are about individual choices, but we make individual choices within systems. And so what public health does is it tries to look at those systems and optimize those systems so that all of us in a country can make those choices for ourselves. Yeah, why is 70% of our food ultra-processed foods? And there's a long history here, but essentially it comes down to profitability, right? Corporations are just doing what we have incentivized corporations to do, which is maximize profit and growth. They aren't intentionally trying to make people sick. They just don't care that you're getting sick.
Is it safe to listen to information from someone who tends to profit off of how that information makes you feel?
It's one of the things that I think if you understand the difference, it will
Change your life.
Yes, it will propaganda proof you online.
I feel like something happened in our world where in the past couple years, there's so much, and it may just be the algorithm or social or whatever, but I'm hearing everything about all of our food all of the time. And I also know as a business woman, who, works with people all the time, that the wellness industry, has gone like quadrupled in the billions, like in the past 5-10 years. Like it's unbelievable.
Yeah. It's a massive industry.
It's a massive industry.
Yeah.
I mean, like to the point where I'm like, girl, what am I doing well so I can come up with a supplement for it? Okay. I was like, is my skin moisturized? Could I do a supplement for that? Like, I feel like I'm a good thinker. Is there a supplement for that? Because I'm trying to get in.
Yeah.
It is such good money. We're talking billions of dollars. Like knowing that that's the case, when did this all happen? Like as a professional kind of looking at this from the outside and saying, what are we doing? When did you notice a change where suddenly I shouldn't even say health, wellness was using health as a marketing tool? When did that happen?
I think it's been kind of a progression over the last decade plus of social media. And I think there's probably a confluence of many things that caused this to happen. Again, we went back to people are feeling disillusioned by the medical system. So they go to social media for some sort of solution. And with supplements in particular, they're not regulated like pharmaceutical medications.
Whoa. Pause. So I have a question for you then, if that's the case.
Yeah.
So if supplements aren't regulated, but people sell supplements all the time.
Yeah.
Like it's a very common, business mode for influencers, some form of supplementation, whether it's through a lotion or a cream or a dissolvable or whatever. But there's no governing body that is the National Supplement Association, that's owned by the government or owned by some that is researching this, and saying, hey, this one's safe.
Yeah, so there's a history there. In the 90s, we decided that the FDA commissioner during that time, the head of the FDA, really wanted more oversight over dietary supplements, and they just lobbied very hard against that from happening.
Who's they, when you say they?
Supplement companies, and then Orrin Hatch, who was a
a
representative in Utah.
Is he even alive still?
I'm not sure.
I don't know either.
But his son worked for a supplement company or owned a supplement company, and Utah was really the one who pushed very hard for this. There was a commercial with Mel Gibson that came on and was essentially, it was all about
that didn't age well.
No, it was
just,
no, he was in this commercial as well. It was essentially scaring you that the government was going to take over if they had oversight over dietary supplements. It was a whole thing back in the 90s.
I didn't even see. It's so funny because back in the 90s, I was such a young woman that I don't even recollect these things.
I mean, I was too, Nicole.
Yeah, exactly. Both. We were so young. We must have had to read and study about this.
Yeah.
So this actually goes way back because also in the 90s, I think, from what I do recall, the political administration was on both sides. I don't even know if Clinton was in the office then or if it was Bush in office. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But, the 90s kind of spanned kind of a back
Clinton was
and
also
forth.
a centrist, deregulatory president.
Yes, which for those of you guys who aren't politically fancy, that's kind of smack in the middle. He wasn't, and a lot of, our politicians are kind of smack in the middle. They were for a while. We kind of got more on one side or the other recently.
Yeah.
That is new. And that is something I think most of us can agree that feeling you feel of it's divisive is because it is more extreme on both sides.
Yeah.
But that being said, during that time is when this sort of supplement thing kind of came to, hey, we'd like to kind of get some oversight because it seems like this is getting to be bigger. I remember stores like GNC. I don't know I don't even know if they're around anymore, but whole stores you could go into that have protein, but I just didn't know what to do in there.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So So that completely unregulated. Like there's not like you just sell whatever.
Yeah, so the FDA wanted to get, regulatory oversight, and anyway, because we were kind of in this deregulatory era
Mhm.
coming out of Reagan
Mhm.
into, Bush 1 and
Mhm.
then Clinton, it was this era, and so, basically, they took regulatory oversight away from the FDA, and they said, "We're not going to regulate, dietary supplements. What we will do is if there is harm that has been shown from a dietary
We'll go
supplement,
from
the
there.
FDA can step in."
Got it.
So if we're gonna put things out on the market and if there's harm, they can step in and
Great.
help.
So I just want to say from a business standpoint, because as you all know, I'm a business consultant. If you are deciding that you want to get into the supplement world, which sounds like, it's kind of a wild, wild west, .com boom, which is why you might be seeing it everywhere. This is another version of make money quick. It's unregulated, which is very common in America and how a lot of people profit, right down to prohibition and bootleggers, right?
Mhm.
But also know that you may be liable if someone gets hurt from your product, right? Because that they come in on the back end is what it sounds like.
Yeah, and there's lots of cases where this has happened. It happened with ephedra. It happened with this like B complex supplement where
Mhm.
like it caused a lot of liver failure.
Yeesh.
Yeah, and so and we just had there's was just a case this week with liver failure with like a turmeric supplement.
Oh my
Someone
and is
taking too
that
much
because,
turmeric.
like, there's no so I'm just gonna be real, real, real. So everyone's just I'm gonna tell it all on myself right now, we're gonna use me as an example. So we live in California, and in California, you are permitted to partake in, cannabis and, CBD blend type substances, right? So one of the reasons why, if you guys don't know this about me, I'm very scared to use substances, not in a judgmental standpoint, but because I just don't know what they'll do, right? And
Mhm.
it's because of dosage, and I know that dose matters a lot when it comes to taking anything. Is that what's happening with supplements? Because when people are saying on the back, "Oh, you wanna use 1 scoop of this in your water," or "You wanna use this amount," what the heck is that based on if there's no regulatory anything? Are they just saying use 1 scoop, and 1 scoop could potentially, in my body, cause me to have liver failure?
I mean, it depends on the supplement brand.
Yeah.
So some brands are, they want a high quality product, so
Mhm.
they lead with integrity and they try to do their own research in terms of like funding their own studies, right?
Mhm.
And try to look at some outcomes. But what research has shown when they look at these dietary supplement studies is there's some research out there that over 50% of supplements tested weren't exactly what was on the label. So they either included ingredients that weren't on the label or they included ingredients on the label that weren't actually in the product. Over 50% in some of these studies.
I mean, that's a lot,
It
especially with,
is.
like, real talk, in this economy, supplements are expensive.
Yeah.
If I'm paying, $45 for, a protein powder or, $50 on a subscription, no less, for a vitamin, only to find that the active ingredient is not even in there and
Yeah.
there's no one to check. Like, what do you even do? You just report that? Like, how does a regular person even check that?
There's not really a good way. That's why
Oh
when
my
I
gosh.
and this is not to say that we should never take any kind of supplements.
Sure.
It's just something we should know that happens so that we can, 1, push for better regulation on
Mhm.
supplements, right? So that we don't have to play this game of, like, figuring out which corporation does their own third-party testing and
Right.
just, like, be or company and feel better about being able to take things, but also, looking for companies that do third-party testing, which is when an independent lab actually tests their product and ensures that it has in it what it says it has in it,
That makes a
right?
lot of
So,
sense.
yeah, and so, I mean, dietary supplements, it's a huge industry, and not only is it not regulated, the markups are huge.
Tell
Like
me more about that because as a business for not for my own research, of
Yeah.
course. You guys, if you see me come out with vitamins, no, you didn't. Just buy them, okay? Mind your business. But it's like, but that said, okay, so I've noticed that again, there's a lot of influencers and podcasters, and I don't know if Joe Rogan has a supplement line, but I know he has a lot of people who have supplement lines, on his podcast, and people come up with them like literally overnight. Like it's like blink and wake up, they've got a supplement line,
Yeah,
right? And I've seen when I do my back end research into like white labeling,
yeah.
which is just where you basically go to a company and you're like, hey, you guys can make the supplement, whatever. Just put my name, my face on it, my logo, and I'll sell it, right? I'll use my name to sell. It's kind of like, and again, this is not a, political statement, but Donald Trump doesn't own a lot of hotels. He licenses his name to hotels. It's a business move. It makes sense to not have to build your own. You can just make money off your name, right? It's just business, right?
Mhm. I should put
So
my name on a hotel.
I
No,
should
I'm
listen,
just
I would too. I that hotel would be delicious,
Yeah.
okay? Every everything in there. It would also probably need some seasoning. I would probably show up with some dressing. I'm like, there's like everything's balanced. All the plates would have little divided spots in them, right? Where it's
It'd be
like
beautiful.
it'd be
I would
beautiful.
go.
I would stay for a month and a half
Yeah.
and I would come out so good. Okay, skin glowing, girl, like for sure. But that said, so, the same thing happens with supplements, right? It's like people are popping up with these supplements. So there's no guarantee that they've done that third party testing. They're just saying, I did use this and it felt good for me.
Well, and they might be doing the third party testing. I
Right.
don't know, depending on who we're talking about and
Right.
depending on the supplement, but they're making a lot of money off of those supplements. I mean, they're
Yeah.
probably making 50% of what they're selling for.
Well, I've seen
selling
the
it for.
margins on some of them, and like you can go to a company that does everything for you, including packaging and shipping, and it'll be like, $8 a bottle, and then they're selling them for like $44,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is wild.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of these are very, very overpriced. It's all marketing.
So here I am looking for a solution that I could get for $8, but because it's attached to someone's face and brand, I'm paying more.
Right, which I guess you could say about most
Anything.
yeah, most
Anything.
industries. It's just I feel like for some reason the supplement industry kind of gets a pass on all of this. Like we don't scrutinize
Mm.
it in the same way when it's not even as regulated as foods and pharmaceutical medications in our country
Or
and
cosmetics even.
or cosmetics.
Yeah.
Right? None of it. And so, we should want it to be regulated and we
Right.
should be a bit more discerning when we're seeing people kind of trying to sell us some miracle cure and
Mhm.
just know that like they're making a lot of money off of that sale.
Right. Well, and even if they're not, one of the things I would love to see elevated in conversation amongst influencers, podcasters, people who are bringing people on board who are talking about these opportunities or not opportunities, these options that you have, is that they encourage them to say, "Hey, let's be an advocate for regulation because I know my product is so good it'll pass." You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
how about we do that? Because I want to eliminate my competitors. That's how I would feel.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where it's like I have built a product that I know is so solid that I want to also support the government regulating this. So, my line keeps going and all my competitors are wiped out because they're trash.
Well, you just
Like,
tapped into something really important too. One of the reasons that the FDA wasn't able to regulate and why the lobbies pushed so hard in the 90s for this is because one of the things that would have had to happen if they regulated it is that they would have had to show scientific evidence for the claims that they were making. And they knew that they
mm.
couldn't show scientific evidence for many of the claims that they made with a lot of these supplements. And so that was one of the reasons for this. And so today, supplement companies can make claims that there's no evidence to support their claims.
So not having scientific evidence, to be fair, it doesn't mean it's not doing it, right? It
No.
just means that we haven't done the scientific studies to support it.
Yeah.
And some places, because of their margins, meaning they want to keep most of the money, don't want to spend that extra money doing the scientific research. They just want to keep the money.
Yeah, I mean, it is very expensive to do that scientific
Right.
research, so, like, smaller companies just can't do it.
Right.
But yeah, just because there's no evidence doesn't mean that it's not working, but it also doesn't mean that it is,
Got
right?
it.
Because we don't have any evidence to show that it is.
Got it. So if I say I'm taking this, hey, wait a minute, since you're here, do you remember back in the day with all this is a supplement question. So all the infomercial, that would say this thing will stop your belly bloat. This thing will help you trim, 20 pounds off and use this weight loss magic yada yada,
Yeah.
right? And I think we've all seen them, late night ads, things like that. All these things that we're seeing, and I think there's still some now that are like, this will improve your sex life. This will improve your whatever. These are all supplements. They're not actual like pharmaceutical medications because those are the ones that have the paragraphs at the end that say things like may cause bloating, you might die, right? Like
Those are the pharmaceuticals.
Those are actual pharmaceuticals. The ones that don't have
when they're,
that,
like, frolicking in a field
Right,
saying, like,
right.
side effects include.
side effects include, they'll literally be sitting there eating a bowl of cereal. They'll be like, side effects include sudden death immediately.
It's like a happy child.
Right. The happy child's like, this cereal's so good, mommy. You're like, oh dear God. It's
Yeah.
like, but what the irony is, a lot of those medications are like modern day miracles too, though.
Yeah,
You're like,
yeah.
wow, that really saves lives. But all that said, right? So advertising something, isn't it? Like, it really
Well, I mean,
is.
we're only one of, like, 2 countries in the whole world that advertises pharmaceutical medications.
That is a conversation in itself, girl. That is a bring
Yeah,
it
not
on
to
back.
cut you
Yeah,
off.
that's a conversation. No, but listen, y'all, note, bullet point, flag that one
Yeah.
because that says something. But so that is something else. But we also see ads for supplements and things like that, and when we see those ads, they don't have that sort of paragraph at the end saying these things may not be, I think I do hear may not be verified by like anyone, like,
By
and
the
these,
FDA.
by the FDA or these
These
claims
statements are not yeah.
are verified, or we cannot, I don't think they say outright, we cannot promise that this does what it says it will do.
But that's essentially what that means from the FDA, like, these have not been verified by the FDA.
Is that sentence required on supplements?
Yeah.
And so if you see a supplement that says, "This has not been verified by the FDA," it is possible that it may not do what it does.
Oh, yeah, I mean, no supplement has to go through that kind of testing, that rigorous testing that shows that it does what it says it does.
'Kay. I'm like,
Do you think that's surprising for people to hear?
"Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Girl, yes." I'm sitting right here saying it just I think I'm gonna be real honest. Even as someone who is smart, who is highly educated, who was in the presence of doctors, so I like to think that I absorbed something by osmosis, right?
Mhm.
So so that said, it is shocking to me that there is a product on the shelf at the price point it is at that has a potentially, I think you said 50% chance.
Well, that's some of the research has shown that, yeah.
Some of the research has shown as much as a 50% chance that it doesn't do what it says.
Yeah.
That's crazy, girl. If
Or
I had to if you told me that I had a stack of bananas, right, and they all looked like they were ripe and ready to eat, but guess what, girl? 50% of them, when you peel it, has bees in it, okay? I'm not picking a banana. Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
Like, that's kinda crazy.
Yeah, yeah, and I think just to be clear, like, there's different variations, right? So, like,
Sure.
if you're talking, like, a vitamin D supplement or a
Mhm,
vitamin C there's a ton of research, right? Because we've done a ton of research into vitamins and minerals and the importance of, like, something like iron if you're anemic,
mhm,
and those types of things. What I'm talking about is more of, like, some of these, kind of, like, trendy supplements that are coming out
mhm.
that just don't have the scientific evidence behind
Right.
them. And
Right,
again,
well,
that
there's
doesn't
always
mean
something new. I will tell you, even in
there
hair
is.
products where they're like, "You need argan oil, you need lavender oil." There's always something new,
Yeah.
but a lot of that is marketing.
Yeah,
You
it's
know, it's just like
marketing.
keep making a fresh spin, on something that's been around forever.
Well, because from a business perspective, it's recurring revenue.
Mhm.
There's huge margins, right? I mean, you can
Yeah, why
talk more
not?
to
Yeah, I'm
this.
like,
This
all
is
of this,
it's
yeah.
like the best kind of business to
It's the
have.
best kind of, and especially
Yeah.
with no regulation, and I have
Yeah.
the opportunity. Like, the truth is, I think a lot of us can, understand this in the simplest way. It's get in while it's good.
Yeah.
Like, if I'm able to build this massive supplement brand, even if it bust in 10 years because there's a total change in regulation, like, I'm a billionaire already. I'll be
Mhm.
alright. You
Right.
know what I mean? And I
Mhm.
think that there is a little bit of that sort of how quick can I get rich situation,
Yeah.
that we always just wanna keep in mind. So it sounds like we should look for if it's regulated by the FDA, which it won't be because it's a supplement,
You should look for if it's third party tested.
third party
And there's some
tested.
big ones like USP and NSF. Those are some big ones
And
that
how do we know that those USP and NSF are, sort of better organizations? Like, what does that
those
mean?
are just kind of the standard third party
Okay.
testers.
Got it. That
Yeah.
do it. Okay. And so that's really helpful. So knowing all of this, I guess the big question I have for you is if I am trying to be healthy, right? And I think a lot of us hear this and it's exhausting. It's just exhausting. Like we are inundated every day with something else that's going to kill us. We're finding out that things are that we are being told to us are tested, and we're being scared into buying them, hoping it works or is better for us.
Yeah.
What do we do? As a mom who's just trying to pick the right formula, and it already feels bad that I wasn't able to breastfeed as long as I, wanted to.
Mhm.
As the mom who's trying to bounce back, and feels themselves, I'm going through things at 41 where I'm not sure if it's perimenopause, if it's postpartum, or if it's just being 41 or heck, I could, I could be pregnant again. Y'all don't even wish that on me. You know what I mean? I have 4 babies, but, like you just don't know what's going on with you.
Yeah.
And then you see an ad that says, hey, your hormones are out of whack. You're going to crash your car tomorrow. You know what I mean?
Right.
Take this vitamin.
Mhm.
Like, girl, what do we do?
Yeah.
Just eat a salad?
Well, I think that you're touching on something that's really important is that like supplements are kind of like taking this role because it seems like this easy fix, but and also with social media, it overcomplicates everything, right? Like we
Mhm.
were kind of talking, I can't remember if it was on or off air, but about how like there's literally a video out there that will scare you from eating anything.
Yeah,
Like if
that's
you
true.
want to find it. I actually did a compilation of this one time and it was like from carrots to apples to all of these things that we would look at as healthy, fish, which has
Mhm.
mercury, right? I like
Mhm.
even put a plate together sometimes and I'm like, if I was going to fearmonger you, I could do it about each of these ingredients right now.
Wow.
I mean, even there was a woman who was doing it with water and saying water dehydrates you and you should drink only coconut water instead.
Lord.
And and so
No.
there's just always something. So I just want people to understand it's a lot of noise. It's a lot of
Mhm.
noise competing for your attention, trying to use like flashy hooks and trying to use conspiratorial narratives. And that's not to say that there's no issues and we can talk through those issues, but understand that like the basics, the fundamentals of health, like from an individual perspective, have been the same for decades. It hasn't changed that much. We have tweaks here and there,
As
and
we've
we've
learned
yeah,
more.
and we've learned
Mhm.
more, and, like, things have shifted, but, like, overall, it's really fundamental, like, it's eat a variety of foods, eat the rainbow, right? That's what they say.
Mhm.
Like, eat lots of fruits, vegetables, meet your fiber intake guidelines, get a variety of proteins, eat whole grains, if you can tolerate them, and limit, your intake of low nutrient, ultra processed foods that are high in salt, sugar, and fat, which make them hyper satiating and make you wanna eat more of them. Do that from a nutrition perspective. Move your body. Try to walk, enough steps per day and get out there and move. A lot of us, I mean, the average American walks 3 to 4,000 steps a day. They're not moving.
Mm.
You know,
And what should we be walking?
there's not really a set number.
Mhm.
It's probably different for most people. 10,000 steps is the number that's always thrown
Mhm.
out there. It's not really evidence-based
Mhm.
number. It's more of just like a benchmark for people. But more, you
Yeah,
know,
more, like
for
moving
most of
more.
us.
Mhm.
And 80% of Americans aren't meeting physical activity guidelines, which is 150 minutes per day of moderate to vigorous physical activity. So let's start there. 90%
Mhm.
aren't meeting vegetable guidelines and fiber. 80% aren't meeting physical activity. So do we have to be so concerned about like if we're taking the most specific supplement? Like let's
Mhm.
start there. Let's reduce stress. Most of us are stressed out of our minds.
Mhm.
Let's try to get 7 to 9 hours of sleep per day,
Mhm.
whoever you are. Most of us aren't doing that. It's very difficult
Mhm.
to do.
Mhm.
Let's go to preventive healthcare visits and screenings. Many of us aren't doing that. Many
Just
of
get
us don't.
information. I tell people that
Yeah.
all the time, just get your info.
Yeah, and just make sure that like because it's a lot easier to treat something if you catch it early than on the back end if you have to end up at the emergency room late stage of something else. And so those are really the foundations of health. And like if more of us followed those foundations, which are really evidence-based and what government guidelines recommend, we'd be in a better place. And then once you're doing that, you can do other cool things that are like
Tweaks in that.
optimizing your health and
Sure.
biohacking and all of those things.
Mhm.
That's great, but you don't have to focus on that before you focus on the fundamentals. So I think if you just at the end of the day, like come back to the fundamentals, come back to kind of like what's been true for so long, come back to just like the basics. Don't be too scared by all the people just trying to sell you stuff online. It can go a long way.
I think that that is a mic drop right there, and that is and it's so real. It's not sexy.
Yeah,
You know
it's
what I
not.
mean?
It's
It's
not.
not
It's not
cool.
flashy.
Like, not like, when I sit down with my doctor, I've actually had you guys, I'm a lot. I tell my therapist she needs a therapist because 'cause I'm a lot, right? I'll sit down with my doctor will tell me, look me right in the face and say, "You really need to eat less salt." Like, "Your blood pressure's too high, you need to less salt." And I'll say him, "So that's not happening. So what else are we going to do?" Because I don't like that answer. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, I am African. I like to heavily season my foods. So what else are we going to do? And he'll chuckle a little bit and he'll say, "I appreciate your honesty. If that's what you're gonna do, like make sure you're hydrating, work out, and try to gradually reduce your salt or try to make some other less salt options." Like
Mhm.
just I mean, he was honest with me about it, but that was the reality was, some of the things you described are hard for people to do. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like either through habits or through financial or through
Well, we should
systemic
talk about that
factors. Yeah.
because what I said is really on an individual level, right?
Mhm.
And so that's where you go from like the individual health to the public health aspect to kind of
Right.
bring it full circle.
Yes.
So we talked about all of those like kind of aspects, those buckets of health, right? It's like
Mhm.
the nutrition and the physical activity and the stress and the
Yep.
sleep and the healthcare.
But I'm like, 7 to 9 hours, girl, I got kids.
Yeah.
You want me to
Yeah.
eat all these groceries? I have kids home from the summer and they're eating with their summer stomachs, not their school stomachs, okay? It's like every 5 seconds a snack, you
Yeah.
know? You're telling me, "Oh, eat more fiber." I'm like, "French fries are good." You know
Mhm.
what I mean? Like, and I can grab whatever's within arm reach while I'm working if I eat at all.
Yeah.
Like, it's so easy for me to have something to say about every single one of those things, and if you're telling me I can take a handful of green pills every day and that meets all of my nutrients, like, why wouldn't I want to just do that?
Right. Yeah, and but the problem is that a lot of people don't have access to a lot of those things that I just said.
Mhm,
And so
mhm.
so we need to look at kind of the systems that we can where we can help people because if you look at kind of the data, and I've mentioned this a couple of times, but if over 90% of Americans aren't meeting vegetable and fiber intake guidelines and 80% aren't meeting physical activity guidelines, why is that? That's like my question.
Yeah.
That's what I'm most interested in. Like, how can we get more people to be adopting these behaviors? And if you look at America, for example, let's just take physical activity. Let's look at our work week. Let's look at how
Yeah.
long people are working, how many jobs they're having to work in order to make ends meet right now because of income
Mhm.
inequality, because of low paying jobs, because we're not wages aren't keeping up with our productivity. Our productivity has surged and our wages have kind of stagnated.
Flatlined. Mhm.
Yeah, and so let's look at that. Let's look at the fact that America was built for cars. right? We were built I'm from
Mm.
Detroit. So we were
Yep.
everyone that I knew growing up at least had one parent that worked in the
Mhm.
automobile industry. And so our entire country is built for cars. We don't have good public transport in most
Mhm.
places. We have lots of cities and towns that are not walkable or bikeable. I mean, if you go to Europe, there's a lot of comparisons with us in Europe. You go to
Mhm.
European countries, my husband's from Romania, so we go back most summers,
Mhm.
and everything's walkable.
Yeah, a car is not even sensible in
No, or
Europe.
they have very
Yeah.
small cars, right?
That's true,
Like
and food is
our giant
also
ones.
very present. So in Ghana, my mom is Ghanaian, and there's a market, but
Yeah.
outside of the market, in each person's sort of local neighborhood, there's people selling their fresh goods within walking distance, and so that's something that I is very noticeable to me here in America. Like,
And by the way,
you know
those fresh goods that are, like, on the stand, they're
Mhm.
probably very, like, inexpensive,
Extremely. Like, you can buy,
right?
like, I mean, it's just a they're actually cheaper than other foods,
Exactly. That's
like
how it is in Romania.
ketchup is more expensive than buying the tomato at the market,
Or the tomato at the market at the food stand is actually cheaper than if you go to the grocery store and you buy
Absolutely,
it.
significantly cheaper, like,
Here, it's
yeah,
the exact
it
opposite.
is.
Farmers markets are crazy they're so
No,
expensive.
that's so true, and
Yeah.
also just getting, like, snack foods here, so, like, I have my 3 daughters that I adopted, and they were in a tough situation in Baltimore, and one of the things they ran into was that if they needed food, the closest thing they could get to was they call them corner stores,
Yeah.
there, which are just basically, crackers, snacks. They may have one cooler with, like, eggs, bacon, but things that are more shelf stable that sit for a while, and no produce whatsoever.
Yeah,
Like,
because they lived
produce
in a
was
food
not
desert.
they live in a food desert, right?
Yeah.
So even in a major city like Baltimore, which, population of 600,000, you have these pockets where it's a food desert, not because there isn't a grocery store in the city, but the closest one they could not get to without walking 3 miles there and back. And 3 miles isn't a lot, but it's not close, especially if
Yeah.
you don't even have bus fare, you
Yeah, and
know?
I don't think a lot of people I don't think realize this.
Yeah.
Like when I first started learning about food deserts, I just thought, oh, I've driven across America before. I've
Mhm.
seen these like little towns that I'm like, how do people live here? And there's no
Mhm.
grocery store within miles. And those are food deserts.
Mm.
But that's a very small percentage of food deserts. The
Right.
vast majority of them are in urban areas, as you're
Yeah.
saying, like in our cities, where because of intentional kind of redlining and planning,
Right.
that we've a lot of disinvestment in those areas, and so grocery stores left those
Yeah.
areas and they moved to the suburbs or they moved to wealthier areas
Mhm.
that they could make more money, right?
Sure,
Because
why
that's
not?
what a
Because it's a
corporation wants.
corporation. Yep.
And so in a lot of our areas now, in what we term food deserts, are these kind of pockets where, as you say, there's corner stores, there might be a dollar
A
store.
dollar store,
Yeah,
but
there's
not
a
fresh
gas
products.
station. There might be like one little stand in the gas station that has like some apples and
And
bananas.
bananas. Mhm.
Yeah, and that's their access to produce.
Yep, and they're actually expensive to buy, like, paying a
Yes.
dollar for a banana when I could get 4, at a grocery store is just it makes it where we're not choosing bananas,
Yeah, exactly.
We're gonna pick
Exactly.
the packaged applesauce, you know
Yep.
what I mean?
Yep.
As which is still a better option than nothing, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
But
you're
it's
gonna
just
pick
kind
the
of
99-cent Dorito chips.
100%,
Yeah.
and so that is something that I've not only, experienced, but I've witnessed through my own girls, and I've lived in a city, and I think some people listening here may remember from their own childhood, where that's what you have, and so that's what you eat,
Yeah.
and a lot of the things were, especially from the dollar store, things that are on the shelf, so it's like if you're lucky, pasta sauce, spaghetti sauce, canned goods, if those are even available. So, I think that that is something that I think a lot of us may not share. Some of us may share in our experiences, but other people may not know anything about it. So it's
Mhm.
easy to say, oh, well, the big issue is what is in the foods on those shelves, but not understanding that it's like, no, there isn't even another option for people to have if they want to be healthy
Yeah.
and hit that bullet point.
Yeah, and so if you want to improve that for people, you have to improve accessibility for people. You have to improve their ability to buy those foods because again, in the US, because of what we incentivize through agriculture, those, healthier foods are a bit more expensive than
Mhm.
our low nutrient ultra processed foods. And so you need to do that. There's a lot of different strategies like in food deserts, for example. There's like these mobile grocery carts that can come in. And the US government used to fund some of those strategies and used to fund programs that were like, oh, we can help local farmers kind of bring fresh produce into schools and areas and help food pantries because
Mhm.
there's good food pantries there. And unfortunately, we've been seeing a lot of cuts
Funding
right
cuts
now,
around that.
over $1 billion in funding cuts to some of those programs that really help accessibility of food. But from a public health perspective, we want to expand those types of programs because
Mhm.
that's going to help people in those areas, in those less advantaged areas, really have more access to food that
So what
we
was
may take for granted.
We definitely take for granted
Yeah.
because, especially for listening to a podcast, odds are you have access to subscription platforms, a device,
Yeah.
headphones, and all these things are usually aligned with some discretionary income. And a lot of people may not even be in that position. And, I come from not just witnessing, but raising kids who were raised in that environment. And they had nutrition deficiencies. My daughter's yeah, I'm very sensitive about my babies, always making me a little teary, but
Yeah.
this is a great example. My middle one, the other day, she's 23 now, and she shared that she had like a whole sort of zap moment in her brain where she was like, "Yeah, I looked at this apple that's sitting on my counter because I keep just sort of like a tier of a fruit bowl. That's
Mm.
just something I always have for
Mhm.
quick snacks." And she looked at it and she was like, "Yeah, I remember growing up and being like, oh, apples, that thing that's on that card,' because it was shown to her in class because she'd never seen an apple in real life."
Wow.
And so she made it to age 11, and she had never seen an actual physical apple. She'd only ever heard about them because she wasn't in a grocery store, and she didn't have it served to her,
Yeah.
and it wasn't something that was ever given in its pure form. And that is simply because of financial things, racial things, systemic political things. It's
Yeah.
absolutely wild that a child will make it to age 12 and not know what an apple looks like in America, and
Yeah.
that is a much bigger issue.
And I think a lot of people will be very surprised to hear that. And I found this when I started talking about this, like on my social media platform, and I started explaining kind of redlining. I started explaining food deserts and things like that. And I had many, many people who were like, thank you for talking about this. I never knew people lived like this.
Oh,
Like I
yeah.
never knew these areas like existed.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think people realize like millions and millions of people live like this.
Mhm.
13.5% of our country live in food insecure households.
Mm.
And food insecurity doesn't necessarily mean they don't have access to food. It means they don't always have reliable access to their
That's right.
next meal, or they don't have access to the nutrients they need to meet their nutrient needs.
Yeah,
So
or
as
it's
you
not
say,
enough just in general,
yeah,
like, they're sharing, but everybody's a little bit hungry all the time.
yeah, or as you say, like they had nutrient deficiencies. That could be because they're not having access to nutrient dense foods. They have
Mhm.
access to maybe low nutrient foods that are
Mhm.
going to fill them up. They're going to have calories, but they're
Yep.
not going to be the nutrient dense foods that are going to help to meet nutrient needs.
Yeah, my girls ate a lot of ramen noodles.
Yeah.
That was, like, a really big part of their diet, and we felt it. We felt it when we were trying to fill that gap later on, it was a real issue.
And why that's important, just I mean, there's a million reasons why that's important, but when you're thinking about, like, the health of America, when we
Mhm.
see statistics about the health of America and we see our life expectancy and we see chronic disease rates, right? And oftentimes in the current narrative, we're compared to other countries, right? They'll
Mhm.
compare us to Japan or they'll compare us
To
to
Europe or
A
yeah.
European country, and really, we don't have to do that. We can compare ourselves right here in the United States. We can
Ooh.
compare we can compare a state to a state, we can compare a county to a county, a zip code to a zip code, and we can compare low and high income populations. And then when you do that in the United States, there's research to show that between high and low income populations, there's a 15-year age gap for men and a 10-year age gap for women between the highest and lowest thresholds. And I mean, when you look at chronic disease rates, people in the low income bracket are 5 times more likely to report poor or worse health outcomes than people in the highest income bracket. And in some research, there's a 20-year life expectancy age gap just between zip codes in the same exact city. And so I think what we need to do is when we're thinking about making America healthy, you really have to see like, well, who's most impacted? Who's
Mhm.
most affected by poor health and why? What is the root cause of that? And then try to create policies and try to create things that are going to help improve health for those people
Can
while
we
lifting everyone up.
While lifting everyone up,
Yeah.
exactly. So what does it look like? What responsibility first, because I definitely wanna close with our individual responsibility, right, to the greater picture of America's health, right? But what responsibility I'm asking for me, and for anyone listening who has a platform, who has a microphone, who is in a position where they can influence or affect people's perspective around wellness, around health, around their choices. When it's easy to say, "Look over here," instead of looking over here, what responsibility do we have to helping this conversation move in the right direction for greater change?
I think it can be hard sometimes because, a lot of us are very focused and rightfully so. We should focus on like improving our individual health.
Mhm.
And so part of that is decreasing stress and decreasing, just improving kind of like your mood and things
Mm.
like that. And so some of these topics can be heavy and some of
Yeah.
these topics can feel really insurmountable. And it can be really easy to just kind of like tune them out and
Mhm.
say, okay, well, that doesn't impact me,
Or it's not my job, right?
or
Like,
it's, yeah,
I'm
or
just
what
here to
can I
make sure
do?
that people are able to get lipo when they want lipo.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanna talk about, and if you don't get it, you're not my people.
Yeah.
But also, like, everybody's my people, right? So what
Because
does that mean?
yeah, we live in a society, and in
Mhm.
public health, we call this the social contract.
Mhm.
And, if everyone does that, then we don't have a society where we're kind of lifting everyone up. And so what's important to realize is, like, with public health, we all benefit from public health. It's
Yes.
kind of everything that we don't think about: our clean water, our clean air, our food that doesn't have pathogens in it
Mhm.
that you can
Disease
safely
is not
eat.
floating around. Like, I love being able to go into a restaurant and know I'm not walking out with measles. Like,
Correct.
that's my favorite.
Or some
Like
sort of pathogen. I mean, sometimes it
mhm.
happens, right? But
Right,
not
it does.
not
But,
very
like, listen,
often.
I will take the cold over measles any day, you know what I mean? If I have options,
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah, we're not impacted by infectious disease
Mhm.
at this time, like we were. I mean, even 100 years ago. A
Mhm.
100 years ago, 20% of children under age 5 didn't make it past their 5th birthday. 200 years ago, half of all children didn't make it past their 5th
So
birthday.
is this why when people say, "But I growing up, I never heard about this," or "This didn't exist," or "That wasn't a thing," the reason why we didn't hear about those things were because those kids were dead?
Yeah, I mean,
It
sometimes.
sounds dramatic, but you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like, I didn't know anybody who had, measles, when I was 5, and it's like because they might have died.
Yeah, and that's survivorship bias, right? So
Yeesh.
so we have a lot of that, like, when you think about, like, the vitamin K shot, I get this a lot with,
Mhm.
like, "Oh, I'm surprised my kids, like, survived because they didn't get the vitamin K shot." And so, like, if they didn't get it, right, it'll be like, "Oh, they didn't need it."
But that's that correlation causation thing again,
Yeah, and
right?
it's more survivorship bias where you're just focusing on the people that survived and forgetting about the people who
That
didn't.
didn't,
So there were
yeah.
decades spent trying to figure out a solution for all of these babies who were dying
Got in
from
the rev
vitamin K deficiency bleeding.
so in the reverse of that, my daughter, survives stage 4 cancer, and one of the things that we always talk about is how when people get a cancer diagnosis, which is a terrible, difficult, hard thing, but it instantly feels super, super heavy, but one of the things I always tell people when they have that diagnosis is, "Look, survivors don't get parades," and so part of why you may feel like heavy at the forefront of that cancer journey is that you're thinking, "I'm gonna die,"
Yeah.
because it's of that natural association because the fundraisers, charitable organizations, all those things. But there's a whole survivorship community of
Yeah.
people who are living with cancer, living after cancer, and it is much bigger than the people who have died of cancer. And
Yeah.
it's like that's something that people just don't know. You know what I mean? So you're telling me that one of the things that we can do is one, just be aware that the decisions we are making every day can actually, and what we advocate for and what we talk about can actually affect the masses and to their detriment.
Yeah, and we're able to make individual choices about our health because of public health systems that help
So
everyone.
it's a privilege that
And
we're even able to do that.
it's a privilege. And if we don't, and if we lose focus and we lose track of that and we lose sight of that and we allow kind of that infrastructure to kind of be eroded or taken away from us because we don't realize the benefit of it, it's going to impact all of us. And so if you have toxic air around, I
Mhm,
mean, you live in
mhm.
LA.
Yeah,
Think about LA 40 years ago, right? Before we
absolutely.
had a lot of 50 years ago, before we had a lot
Mhm.
of environmental regulations, there was a lot of smog in
It was
LA, and you
really
guys don't
bad.
have that as much anymore, right? And
Mhm.
so that's going to negatively impact people's health, and that all comes from a public health lens. And so we really, when you live in a society, when you're not just like out by yourself in the woods, not interacting with anybody, when you live in a society, there tends to be kind of this understanding in a lot of in most other countries and many people here that we live in this society and we are going to do what's like best for the society, and we're going to work on that, and that's going to help me at an individual level as well.
Mhm.
And I think that if we got back to that and we realized that we can improve our own health and we can improve everybody else's health around us, I think that at the end of the day would be the most helpful.
Oh, so valuable. It makes me feel like, okay, I've got a mantle, like, right? It's just get the word out, girl. You know what I mean? Like, just let people know. And I'm so grateful that you're doing this work of just letting people know, like, look, you have options. There are things you need to know. You don't have to believe every single thing you hear,
Yeah.
but you also are informed to, start from a baseline of the basics, and then kind of build upon that. So if there was one thing, right, that you could sort of an ask, right, that you would make of every person that they could do that would contribute to public health every day. Just something, whether it's at the, ballot box, like researching before you vote or whatever else, or whatever the ask is, what do you think would help people improve everything for their neighbor? What is the one ask you would put out there for everyone?
I think that it's from a public health perspective, it's first going back to like what I started this podcast with, just saying wellness can be important. These do not have to be mutually exclusive. You can focus on your own wellness routine. I do. I have a pretty like rigorous wellness routine. I exercise, I eat well, I do all the things. I try to get enough sleep. I'm
Mhm.
terrible because I have a 5 and a 2-year-old.
Yes,
But
real
you can
life.
you can focus on all of those wellness things and also advocate for public health for all and realize that what works for you from a wellness perspective is not necessarily what's best from a public health perspective, right?
Mm.
Because people are dealing with barriers that you might not even know about. So, being more open minded, being open to new information, I didn't always know about food deserts. I mean, I grew up in the suburbs in Michigan. I didn't always know this information. And when started realizing it and started putting these pieces together, I realized, oh, what works for me isn't going to work for everybody else. So what kind of systems can we put in place to kind of, lift everybody up because a rising tide lifts all boats, right? And kind of lift us up and healthier place as a country.
So good. So amazing. Dr. Jessica, thank you so much for your work. Thank you for everything you put out on social media, just keeping us informed and just giving us the option to take what you're sharing and measure it against everything else and figure out where we're supposed to stand. And I'm just very, very grateful for you because it ain't easy in these, trying to stay alive streets,
Yeah, for
but you're
sure.
really doing it for us. So thank you for being here today and for telling us so much more.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.